Citrus in Arizona. Well, citrus came in when the Spaniards came in the 1700s with Father Kino into southern Arizona. It was planted around the missions in southern Arizona and also in southern California. But the commercial industry started in various places, certainly in the Phoenix area first, but later on in Yuma when they built the siphon in the early 1900s. And then it really did begin to take off following World War II. There was the Homestead Act, where the soldiers were able to get some free land if they farmed it for 7 years, and that was happening around here. And then also in about the 1950s, some entrepreneurs from Ventura County came to the desert and realized that the desert was a good place to provide citrus for the United States, because we could grow citrus and it would be harvested at a time where it wasn't available at in other times of the year. So a September, October, November harvested citrus was something that they couldn't provide, particularly with lemons, outside of growing in the desert.
I'm a third-generation farmer. My grandfather came here back in the late 40s and developed a lot of the citrus growing region here in Yuma. We're talking about brown wood rot. Over the years, it's been known by Coniophora, Fomitopsis. We've called it a number of things. We usually just call it brown rot, although it is not the same brown rot that affects fruit in the packing houses. This is, we just call it brown rot culturally.
Back in the 70s, the acreage in Arizona is about 72,000 acres. By the time I arrived in the early 1990s, we had about 35,000 acres of citrus here in Arizona. About 10,000 in the Phoenix area and about 25,000 here in Yuma. Now our industry here in Yuma is down to about 6,000 acres, and the reason is because a lot of the acres that were diseased were taken out.
The thing about this disease is it is native to the Sonoran Desert. It comes from mesquite trees, and a lot of these, the original plantings in Yuma were planted in the 50s and 60s. So by the 80s, you know, they were 20, 30, 40 years old in age. And over a long time, as you citrus growers will know, when you have heavy production, you're gonna have breaks and you're gonna start losing limbs. And that leaves a bunch of rough entrances for the disease to take hold.
So lemon brown wood rot is a problem known back in 1970. But the quest for pathogen identification has been challenging. It takes about more than 30 years for first identification of a species of Coniophora to be the cause of the brown wood rot. In 2000, Dr. Matheron discovered a second species, which is Antrodia seniosa, is the main cause of lemon brown wood rot. And I joined the team in 2016. We found the Antrodia seniosa is a misidentification. Instead, it should be Fomitopsis maniae, the one caused, the dominant species caused lemon brown wood rot in Yuma. We can still discover the presence of Coniophora in lemon orchard, but it's not as dominant as the Phytophthora.
So what we have here is kind of the beginning that you'll see a lot, and it's usually the part of the tree that's in the wind and whipping around, and it'll get a little break on it. That disease has gotten into this little branch, and I would say this has only been maybe a month or two. And what will happen is if you run your topper down this line, you're going to infect this whole thing. And, you know, we'll make no mistake about it, this is an absolute killer. If you don't take care of this year, this month, your tree might not be here next year.
Once the tree is infected, the thread-like hyphae will travel up and down the branch, producing enzyme to degrade the cell wall structures, leave behind the characteristic color of brown in the diseased wood. When the fungus Phytophthora consumes the wood of an infected branch, the branch will collapse and fall into the floor of the orchard. After a number of the wetting and drying by flood irrigation, fruiting body will be formed on the diseased branch on the orchard floor. In rare cases, fruiting body can be seen on the lower tree trunk because of wetting by macro sprinkler. When fruiting body ripen, billions of spores are produced and released into the air, become airborne. Those spores are primary source of inoculum, spreading the disease from one tree to another, from one orchard to another, from one region to another region. The research done at the University of Arizona found spores are constantly being produced and released into the air throughout the year. So the fruiting body formed on those abandoned diseased wood fragments laying on the orchard floor. After many cycles of wet and drying, the fruiting body is developed. And then the billions of spore will be released into the air, and then it will be landed onto any injury on the tree, started the initial infection.
2009, we had a catastrophic freeze, and I believe the other one was in 2011. We're talking temperatures of sustained at 16 degrees in some areas. And what that did was created a whole 10,000 acre area of lesions where the xylem and phloem had swelled up and actually popped the bark. I remember that night, it was 16 degrees. I kept hearing what I thought were gunshots. It sounded like a 22 going off, and it was actually the bark exploding on the trees. So after these freezes, we started seeing this coming back.
So this is an example of infection. It has the typical symptom, the gummosis. You can clearly see the typical brown color of diseased wood. This is a healthy wood. It's white and clean, but infected wood will have brown color.
You'll see that it starts with a fast decline where you'll see the leaves are almost frozen in time because it kills it so quick. And then it'll start to show some gummosis where that xylem and phloem is still being pushed to the area, but that it is just choked off and dead. But that will continue to go down, and it will try to go straight for the trunk. And once you get to the trunk, it makes the wood so brittle on top of being dead, but the side of your tree that's still alive, the second it gets a fruit load, it's just going to fall over and break. You'll even see trees that'll break just in half. So here we have a more advanced stage. You can see they had previously pruned it and thrown the diseased wood under the tree, and that just kept the spores in this location. And you can see that this disease, it doesn't want to affect the tree. It wants to go straight for the trunk. And even though your tree will still be alive because the xylem and the phloem is keeping the green of the tree alive, that inside of your trunk is brittle and it will break once you get a fruit load.
Historically, what's happened is that the pruners would come in, they'd find a diseased branch, and they'd simply throw it underneath the tree itself in order to get it out of the way. And of course that just means that you have a source of spores that are making disease in the tree underneath the tree. So that's absolutely the wrong thing to do.
In the early teens, we were cutting, we had a lot of dead wood to cut off. We would cut this off, put it in the rows, and use our brush choppers. And what we found out later was that this is an airborne pathogen, and we were just creating clouds of spores that were just constantly saturating the grove with more spores and making it easier for the disease to spread. What we started doing on our farm in particular is we'll make this big cut, and we will still stack in the middle of the row, but instead of chopping, we'll come through with a grappler arm that we've put on our front end loader, take it off site and burn it.
Probably the number one thing you can do to help solve the problem is to be aggressive and prune it out, and prune it out, and prune it out. Did I mention pruning it out? So one of the growers I know decided to have a dedicated crew to actually go around and just prune things. And of course, along with pruning means you have to do some education, because it's no good to prune out part of the disease and not all of it. And so those pruners need to understand exactly what they're looking for and be able to prune it out.
So getting it early is of utmost importance, and having either yourself or your employees constantly scouting for it. Do not be afraid to cut too much tree off. Like, once again, we need to emphasize that if you don't want to go in and spend the money to prune twice or 3 times. You want to get it the first time, and to ensure that, you're going to cut some green wood off, and that's fine. Making a cut and you didn't get deep enough and you still see a little brown mark in there, now your saw or your shear is infected. So you're going to want to disinfect that once you get down to the clean cut, or once you get to the clean area, use your clean saw and do your final cut. And another thing we'll do, just as a protection, we'll make a Bordeaux mix of whitewash with copper. Maybe we'll throw some product in it just to, help out any other things that might seal off the wound.
Another thing that some growers have felt that might be useful is to modify the architecture in such a way so as to reduce damage. Well, what does that mean? Well, certainly that means pruning out some of the branches which might otherwise break. A regular pruning regime which removes water sprouts and root stock suckers and those kinds of things, which are oftentimes quite tall and quite weak and have a tendency to break, that's a good thing to do. When you do your pruning when the tree is young, is to establish a good scaffold branches that are relatively wide angled like that, so rather than narrow angled, because narrow angled branches tend to break more than wide angled ones do. And so it's a good idea to prune your tree in such a way that you begin to get that type of a tree. So over the years, in order to combat this disease, my predecessors and I have looked at a lot of different things. We thought about injection, but that was pretty expensive, and as a result, it worked, but it didn't work because of the economics of it. And then we tried using nanoparticles, the idea being that the nanoparticles of zinc would get up inside the xylem and kill the fungus, but that didn't work very well either. And of course, there's always the question of whether there's some genetic screening, or some trees are more resistant to the disease than others, and that's something that I can't tell at this point because the trees that we have are not old enough to know. Then there's the question of fungicides, and over the years we've looked at varying fungicides, and my predecessor Mike Matheron did some work a number of years ago using something called Nectec paste, which was a mixture of propiconazole and azoxystrobin, and it worked very nicely. And the problem was it worked nicely in the laboratory, not in the field, because it was a paste. The question only is, how do you get it to where it needs needs to be used in the tree. And that's not as easy as it might sound. But more recently, we just finished the first year of a trial where we did some work on some of these products, and we did find that one of the propiconazoles was highly effective in reducing the growth of the fungus that was already in the tree. And that's good. We've only done 1 year of it, and so we need to do it some more, but that's pretty good. And it wasn't particularly cost prohibitive because we applied it in an air blast sprayer, 250 gallons of water per acre, and we applied it 3 times a year, and it worked out pretty well.
And we knew that we had a couple products that were effective, but the problem was the labeling. 7 years ago, we were looking for other options that maybe weren't chemical based, and we came across a company called Phytophthora that their way of doing things is through tree health, through biologics, things like humic acid, just really pumping the tree full of the stuff it needs and good stuff, and to try to outrun this disease. Phytophthora now makes a product specifically for the guys in Yuma to use. We'll use it as a foliar application with our thrips sprays in the spring, which gives us kind of gives us a knockdown on the spores. But also we will apply it directly to the wounds. However, that's not considered a fungicide once again. That is more tree health. Anytime we're doing disease work in the field, pruning disease, whether it be by shear or chainsaw, every cut we make, we are spraying it with Phytophthora mixed with some copper, just to give it some extra protection to not get reinfected. The big thing for us as growers is, of course, cost. And some of these chemistries are very pricey because they are still under patent. Some of the generics, they're a lot cheaper, and they do reduce spores in a general broadcast spraying situation. But for the tree itself, we have found that we don't really have, for bearing citrus, we do not have a fungicide that is legal to use at all. So we do not have a silver bullet at this time.
Right now, there's no cost-effective solution to treat this disease in commercial field. The aim of this greenhouse study is to looking for effective fungicide to control this disease.
You know, one thing that we've never really done is we've never really screened fungicides, because the conventional wisdom was that there was no systemic fungicides. But we decided to go and try it anyway, and we have 1 year's worth of data right now, which would suggest that some of the fungicides are actually fairly effective in reducing growth of disease. And we have a small trial here in Arizona. We have a bigger trial of over 600 trees that we're planning on starting in California next year. It's already been funded, so we're pretty excited about that. So I think eventually we'll come up with something that the grower can use as a regular, probably as a prophylactic treatment, spray on once or twice a year to keep the disease down at appropriate times, and hopefully the disease will will be able to be controlled, along with all of these other things that I mentioned, particularly good field sanitation.
So this is 1 year of this disease getting a hold in a good grove. And if you don't take care of it, it's going to be even worse next year. So this is what happens when you do nothing. This grove in another year, it won't even be green at that point, because you'll see, like here, this is in the trunk. The second that this puts on a fruit load, it's gone. And you're gonna end up burning it. And so from one grower to another, stay on top of it. Don't let this get a hold in your growing region, because it's gonna be a headache. We already have HLB to worry about. Don't let brown rot get a hold in your area.